From the top on down, here comes a 1-2 pitch. Red Sox win the World Series. 5-1 the final tonight. And the best team in baseball wins it all in 2018.
Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Courtside. I am your host, Andrew Cohen. Courtside is a podcast dedicated to all things sports. In today's episode, I will talk about the World Series, analyze the latest NFL trades, and discuss Jimmy Butler and the Rockets. So sit back, relax, and take a seat. Courtside. Damage done. The Boston Red Sox are your 2018 World Series champions. And not to toot my own horn or anything, but I did say Red Sox in 5 heading into the series, so, a little added credibility for me over here. But anyways, this World Series was it was awesome. Every game, honestly, was entertaining, especially the 3 games in Los Angeles. You had the 18 innings, 7-hour, 20-minute marathon in Game 3. I stayed up way too long for that. That was crazy. You had the pitcher's duel turned offensive clinic in Game 4. And then you had the Red Sox home run derby with Steve Pearce, Mookie Betts, and JD Martinez in Game 5. He had some great pitching performances throughout the series. Walker Buehler for the Dodgers, he has a bright future, I must say. You had David Price getting off the schneid. I saw this yesterday on Fox. I'm not sure if this is true because it just seemed too amazing, too weird to be true. But apparently David Price is the 5th pitcher in postseason history to have 3 straight starts of 6 innings and 3 or fewer earned runs. I'm not sure if that's MLB history or Red Sox history, but I saw that and I found that to be really interesting. You also had Nathan Eovaldi and Joe Kelly pitch well really throughout the postseason, and they were just awesome for Boston. And you also had some great offensive performances by guys, for like Puig for LA. Justin Turner did his thing throughout the playoffs. And for Boston, right, Steve Pearce. I'd even throw Jackie Bradley Jr. into the mix. Mitch Moreland had a big hit. Just some great offensive performances. You had some stellar defensive plays as well by, Cody Bellinger gunning down Kinsler, in the big, long marathon game. You had Kinsler also misplaying a ground ball to second base that he probably would have made had it been the regular season and not the World Series. But, overall, just an entertaining series. And obviously, only 5 games. But as I predicted at the beginning of this series, every game was close. Every game was competitive. And part of that is just because, in baseball, I think, especially in the postseason, every game seems closer than it is, especially the final game of the series. But I truly believe that every game was really competitive and really entertaining to watch. And, not to let too much hometown bias come into play because I am from the Boston area, growing up watching the Red Sox for years and years and years. But, the Red Sox, they were just amazing throughout this entire World Series and really throughout the entire postseason. And, at least for me, this is definitely the best Red Sox team I've watched in my lifetime. In 2013 was the other World Series I can really remember. That was an awesome season, and that's gonna, it's gonna hold its place in the hearts and the history books of many people around here. As far as dramatic moments go, David Ortiz's grand slam, definitely the best hit of his career. Right, Boston. You have some just big sports legends, right? Him, just Red Sox legends in general on that team. I say legends loosely, but that team was amazing and fun to watch. Boston strong. But, as far as overall baseball teams, this Red Sox team was maybe the best overall MLB team I've seen in the last several years. Coming into the postseason, the big concern of many, including myself, was the bullpen. Aside from Craig Kimbrell, I didn't really believe there were any established relievers that Alex Cora could turn to in October and rely on. And by the way, Kimbrell, the guy who's supposed to be established and just be completely shut down, he struggled throughout the regular season. Really, the second half, he really struggled, and throughout the postseason, he just did not look like his former self. And in addition, you have the trade deadline, where the Red Sox, and Dave Dombrowski, instead of pursuing a reliever, they go after Steve Pearce and Nathan Eovaldi, who, at the time, those moves created a lot of scrutiny over Dombrowski's decision making, and I mean, obviously those guys paid off in the postseason. That's clear, but at the time, and again, I was critical of it as well. I did not like the fact that he did not add a reliever to the bullpen. But I mean, the bullpen was just shut down in the postseason. I mean, save for the supposedly shut down guy in Craig Kimbrell, you had Joe Kelly finish the postseason with an ERA below 0. Heading into last night, he was about .87, so a little bit lower than that. And in 11 and a third innings, he struck out 13 and did not walk any hitter. I mean, he completely flipped the switch from a year in which he kind of had a down season coming out of the bullpen. You also had guys like Ryan Brazier and Matt Barnes really step up when the Red Sox needed them the most. And every pitcher that started a game for Boston this postseason also pitched at least once coming out of the bullpen, right? You obviously had Sale close out the series. You had Price come out in the World Series and pitch out of the pen. Eovaldi was the setup guy in games 1 and 2. Erod started as a reliever. You had Porcello as a setup guy in the ALDS and ALCS. So, I mean, it was really a team effort. It was a complete group effort in that bullpen, but it worked. And really, they just shut down opposing lineups after the starter exited the game. And in a lot of cases, the starter also shut down the opposing lineups. And the craziest thing I think about this postseason for me, right, because the bullpen I think was ridiculous in itself, but the thing for me was that it wasn't really the usual suspects getting the job done offensively. It wasn't Mookie Betts, it wasn't JD Martinez for the most part. Those guys had their moments, right? They tacked on some insurance runs in the last game of the World Series in Game 5. Martinez had a big 3-run home run in his first at-bat in the ALDS that helped them win Game 1 against the Yankees. But it was really guys like Holt in the ALDS first postseason cycle in MLB history. Jackie Bradley Jr. in the ALCS, only 3 hits, but the 3 most clutch hits in that entire series. You also had Steve Pearce, World Series MVP in the World Series, just looking unbelievable. 3 home runs in the last 2 games. I mean, 8 RBIs. I mean, again, coming up in clutch moments and getting it done. And, if you told me at the beginning of the postseason, if you asked me, could the Red Sox win without Chris Sale? I would have said maybe, if the bullpen could pitch well, and they did. But if you asked me, could they win without Chris Sale and Mookie Betts, which they essentially did, I would have told you no way. And somehow they managed to do it. And this team never gave up, and they felt like they were always in the game. And really, honestly, their biggest skill, the biggest thing that contributed to their championship at the end of the day was really just their will and their will to win. Right. The thing to me that I look at was the Red Sox scored more than 30 runs with 2 outs in this postseason. They never gave up. I mean, in this past series, you had Mitch Moreland with a big 3-run bomb and, keeping that game close, getting the Red Sox back in it. They win Game 4. Just unbelievable. And later in that game, in the 9th inning, giving some insurance runs. They're up 1 run, bases loaded, 2 outs. He comes up and socks a double into right center field. I mean, this team was just firing on all cylinders. You want to add to the 2-out scoring? Jackie Bradley Jr., 3-run double in Game 2 of the ALCS. Had the big grand slam later. Had another big home run in the clincher. Again, here's talking about a team that, and you know what, and I'll end with a quote. I mean, this was a quote that a lot of people said throughout the year when they were talking about this Red Sox team, myself included, and that quote is, "This So as of now, there are 2 big NFL trades that have happened over the past couple weeks before the trade deadline on Tuesday, so I'm going to just talk about my thoughts on each of them. Let's start off with the Amari Cooper trade. So the Oakland Raiders sent Amari Cooper to the Dallas Cowboys in exchange for Dallas's 2019 first-round draft pick. And listen, I love this trade for the Raiders. On the other hand, I don't like it too much for the Cowboys. From Oakland's perspective, they're trading away a guy that has not proved he can consistently play at a high level, and really has just been a weak spot for that entire offense. For what used to be a pretty potent Raiders offense even just a few years ago. He's honestly hurt them with all of his drops and his lack of ability to make a big play when is needed. So I think to get a first-round pick from him is an amazing, amazing return. I think part of that is because he was a first-round pick and flashed that potential in the first 2 years of his NFL career. But for the Cowboys, I'm against that. I'm against this trade for that reason, giving up a first-round pick. Again, Cooper is set to make about $14 million next year, and he's clearly not worth that type of money, especially with the way he's playing. And a thing to keep in mind is when a receiver goes to a new team, really any player, but specifically a receiver, they have to learn all the offense and the little nuances and the routes the team runs, and right, it's a completely new offense. And he's going to have to learn that, so he's not going to play that well this year, and it's not going to look like he's worth the $14 million next year. And after next season, in addition, he's going to be a free agent. So there's no guarantee he stays in Dallas if things don't work out. However, he is the most talented receivers the Cowboys have on their roster now, and since he's still young, he will have a chance to grow with Dak Prescott, Zeke Elliott, and the rest of the Cowboys. All right, and the other big trade that happened pretty recently was the Cleveland Browns sending Carlos Hyde to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a 5th-round pick. And I don't really like this trade from the Browns' perspective. Hyde hasn't been great for Cleveland this year. He's only averaging, I think, about 3.4 yards a carry. But he is a proven veteran running back in this league. And considering he was making very little money for this year, at least, I didn't think they needed to trade him at all. I get they wanted to get Nick Chubb, rookie running back. I get they wanted to get him more involved in the offense, but they could have done that easily without trading Hyde. And, in addition, they could have had Hyde kind of serve in like a mentor role for Chubb, another young running back that runs between the tackles. So I didn't really like the trade from their perspective. And for the Jaguars, I like this trade because they only gave up a 5th-round pick and you get a talented player. However, I think this trade speaks more to the health of Leonard Fournette and the state of the Jags without him. Fournette's hamstring injury has basically kept him out the entire season thus far, and he's only played in a total of 2 halves of football. He's missed at the end of 2 halves. And I don't think the Jaguars would trade for another bruising between the tackles runner if his hamstring was close to 100%. So, I think if you're a Jags fan, I'd be wary about this trade. I would be cautiously optimistic about this deal. And finally, I just kind of want to touch on the Patrick Peterson situation, and as well as Deshaun Jackson, maybe briefly as well. But for Patrick Peterson, he requested a trade, I think it was maybe a week ago, earlier in the week. He requested a trade from the Arizona Cardinals, and honestly, I don't know who could blame him. That team is awful. He's a defensive player, so it doesn't really matter how well he plays individually. The team's not going to win if they don't have a good quarterback and a good passing game, and that has, because they have a bad passing game, it's clogged up holes in the running game. But the whole team is bad there, and he deserves to play on a contender, and I would honestly hope he gets to play for a contender this year. I don't think it's going to happen. I think I saw a thing with Bleacher Report where they reported, or they didn't report, but they were making predictions on what every team would do at the trade deadline, or a trade that they should make, and they were talking about the Patriots potentially trading from. I don't like that trade at all. For New England, I get they need some help on defense, but that defensive system is just so complicated. To learn it in a few weeks heading into the playoff stretch, right? The playoff run last few games of the season, I don't like that. So I don't know what the perfect situation for him would be. But I do hope he gets traded to a contender. Again, Arizona's such a bad team, and I would rather see, a team like the Saints at a defensive back or something, just to make things a little bit better in the NFL, make things a little bit more competitive. And I also heard today Deshaun Jackson requested a trade from Tampa, and I don't know, that one seemed to me like he just wants to, right? He's getting older in his career. He doesn't have a Super Bowl or anything. He probably wants to compete for a championship. I don't think he gets traded, especially because I heard the Bucs kind of denied his request for a trade. He scored a 60-yard touchdown in the game against Cincy today, or Cincy at the time of recording this. It is today, which they did lose. So, we'll see how that plays out. I don't expect to see him moved. So it was reported last week that the Houston Rockets were offering the Minnesota Timberwolves 4 first-round picks, guard Brandon Knight, and big man Marquise Chris in exchange for all-star guard Jimmy Butler. And for some just idiotic reason, the Timberwolves declined the trade and told Houston they needed Eric Gordon in any trade, including Butler. Now let me just say, the Timberwolves are being complete and utter idiots here. Jimmy Butler is a poison in that organization, and they, in my opinion, they need to do everything they can to move him. Now, of course, I don't think they should give him up for a bag of potato chips, but of course 4 first-round picks is no bag of potato chips. I get the Timberwolves want to get as much out of Butler as they possibly can, but to not make this trade because of a dispute over a role player is just, it blows my mind. It's ridiculous to me. Now, the first round picks, of course, I don't expect them to be anywhere near the top 10 or anything, but there is definitely a chance those picks become very, very valuable. Butler's a free agent at the end of the year, and there's no guarantee that he will re-sign with Houston. In addition, Chris Paul is getting older, and if the only guy left for the Rockets is Harden, they're not a lock to make the playoffs in what should be a competitive Western Conference for years to come. Now, as far as the players Houston is willing to send to Minnesota, they're both currently injured, which is part of the reason the Timberwolves want to get Gordon in return for Butler, so they actually have somebody that can contribute immediately. And I understand being worried about injuries when you're trading a star player, and Knight is coming off a torn ACL, so there is a legit reason to be cautious there. However, Marquise Chris is just day-to-day, for the most part, and Knight he's expected to come back relatively soon. Of course, it would be great for them to acquire Eric Gordon as well, but I don't think Minnesota needs to get too greedy in this situation. They shouldn't get too greedy in this situation. Now, for Houston, I think they should trade Gordon if that's what it comes down to. At the end of the day, all he really is just a sharpshooter. A very good sharpshooter, but just a sharpshooter. He has attempted more threes than twos per game in each of his last 3 seasons. And he's also, by the way, this year, at the time of this recording, shooting about 23% from beyond the arc. So, I mean, not very good. In addition, if the Rockets were to add Butler in this trade, they would most likely put out a lineup at the final few minutes of a game, including Chris Paul, James Harden, Jimmy Butler, and big man Clint Capella. They'd have 1 spot left. I would assume they would throw in PJ Tucker for defensive purposes. You could also see Melo in there as another forward. But to throw out 4 guards in the last few minutes of a game usually is not going to turn out well. So Gordon would not necessarily be needed on the roster. Now, as for what Jimmy Butler would mean to the team, it would obviously give them a 3rd star, which I think they desperately need in order to truly compete against the Warriors and any of the other strong teams out west. Of course, there's no guarantee he resigns after this season, but my guess is that if the team were to play well and make a deep playoff run, he would probably want to stay for the right amount of money. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of Courtside. Join me next time where I will give my power rankings for the first half of the NFL season, do another edition of Sports Theory, and more. And remember to follow the @Courtside Pod on Twitter, as well as to subscribe to the podcast wherever and however you are listening. And I will be putting out a special video on YouTube this week, so be ready for that. Signing off, this is Andrew Cohen. I will see you next time.